Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Story Time with Will. This is The Way, December 21st, 2012. The survivors. This is a joke, right? One of Milton's gags? When no one spoke, President Carter examined the paper he had been given to read, wishing he had surrounded himself with more experienced people. He had no idea what came next. It wasn't something he had planned to conquer during his time in office. Where do I give the speech? Carter had discovered a love of talking to his people, but Ben Sealing, Deputy Chief of Staff, gestured to the radio the president used for his weekly addresses. It's not safe in public. The rioting started an hour ago in most places and spreading faster than we can keep up with. No cameras, no press. No, Ben refused. We already have 2 security tapes missing. No reporters, no questions. Too many people will still suspect the truth. Usually confident, Carter was almost speechless, unable to imagine how his country would react. He slid behind the impressive desk, for once without reminding himself that it was his. Hand hesitating, he looked up. We're sure? Yes. The agents will take you and your family out as soon as you're finished here. The vice president and his joint chiefs will be in the air shortly, headed for the Essex compound. The president flinched as 2 more shots rang out quick in succession, somewhere nearby. He swept the damning newspaper lying on the spotless desk. Betrayal is the foundation of America. The Gospel of Mary was delivered in southern France last month and has now proven genuine by experts secretly asked to test the parchments. In them is a tale of murder, extortion, kidnapping, and forced reproduction that scientists claim have kept secret the foundations of Jesus Christ. The list of powerful families around the globe that are being accused is staggering. Carter gestured to the newspaper. Tomorrow's edition, he was positive he didn't want to know how it would be obtained. When did they discover the site? An old manuscript was unearthed in France last year. One of the experts refused a large payment to keep quiet, and we couldn't secure all the copies of his findings. The local station is set to run the story tomorrow. Not anymore, exactly. The first-term president stared at the seal, the desk, the walls. These things had been his, and he had done justice to them where he could. But this, it was beyond his control. Carter hadn't quite believed it had been his first, uninformed of the file known as DOC, D-O-C. But it hadn't taken him long to understand how much that would change if the public suspected the massive secret that had been kept all these years. The days of government would be over. Mr. President, please. Breaking into a sweat and not caring that he was running a very expensive suit, Carter stared at the small sea of faces, now hearing heavy stomps above which would only be agents storming through the residence of his family. Ben, perhaps reading some of his thoughts, spoke up. These men have no families to rescue, have been paid well in golden passes, and all of them voted for you. There are no deserters here. You and your family will make it to NORAD safe and sound. Only slightly reassured, the president skimmed what might be his last address, worrying, burning intensely. He glanced up from the pages of the impatient Deputy Chief of Staff. You'll activate the sirens? Both of them looked up at the ceiling lights, changed to pale red. As soon as you're on your way. Now, please, you have to go. D.C. is a direct target. Carter delayed, hating that it had been being rushed, wasn't being told everything. What about air traffic? Vital services. The deputy's lined face went blank, and when he replied, it with a tone that implied it didn't matter. They've been instructed to land the planes anywhere they can, so Star Wars doesn't shoot any more down by mistake. Last report said 4 confirmed crashes, 2 more suspected. Mr. President, we have to. What about vitals, evacuations? Ben sighed in frustration. Knowing the president would have his report before he did anything, Carter could be pushed, but it was likely to be gently. The internet is locked down. Only our senior military have the codes needed to access it. As for evacs, those on the list are 35% recovered at this point, ahead of schedule. And vitals? Carter insisted, knowing it was ugly in the answer. He heard the same terror and anxiety he had felt in his own stomach. We have reports of massive abandonment of posts already. Media stations in France and China are on it. Daycare, schools, hospitals, radar and traffic towers, police stations, utility plants, they're all already starting to shut down. Citizens will have nothing to depend on, no way to survive after the first few months. The deputy's voice lowered. The draft convoys started out a half hour ago. Waves of refugees have been spotted, hitting towns ahead of the trucks. Some of those places are attempting to barricade themselves. We covered it, and our own men will follow orders. The president winced at the mental image. He'd been briefed, but he hadn't honestly thought that it would be this. To their Carter. It was the first time the deputy had ever called him by his first name, and to do it here in the hallowed place was such a strange protocol that it was got Carter's full attention. This was the strategy the smarter men than himself had agreed upon, and after it was time to come out of hiding, he would still be in charge. The U.S. presidency was not allowed to change hands during a time of war unless there was a death. We're using the rest of our arsenal, retaliating even though we could cause it, Carter questioned. Ivan motioned for one of the agents to grab the tapes and the hidden microphone from the desk. It's all underway, he said. Carter's fingers pushed the button, not asking how that was possible without his approval. He'd learned a lot about leadership in the last few years, and one of the biggest lessons was that you didn't ask questions unless you could take the answers. Stomach churning, he began. My fellow Americans, this is your president, Carter Hines, and I have grave news. Let me start by asking each of you to care for and comfort each other in this time of crisis. We'll get through it. Together. He lied, ignoring the men waving at him to skip what didn't matter, to just inform his people that the entire world was about to change violently and forever. At 10:28 this morning, a terrorist was able to gain access to our nuclear arsenal by hacking into the system and introducing an unknown virus that shut down our firewalls and allowed our defense systems, computers, to be breached. As a result, of over half of our warheads were compromised. The terrorists immediately initiated multiple launches, and the warheads are not responding to the abort codes. 10 minutes ago, their stolen weapons began reaching their targets, and other countries have retaliated, thinking we have declared war. The president paused. He couldn't believe he was saying this, and he felt the entire country holding its breath, listening, looking for comfort that he couldn't give. We predict that the United States will take at least 5 nuclear hits. The list of cities that are expecting bombs include Washington, D.C., Houston, Lansing, New York, New York City, Los Angeles. Leave those areas immediately. Noise levels instantly went up throughout the White House and outside. More gunshots destroyed the tense silence, loud and rapid. They should have drawn immediate attention. When they didn't, the president understood that this was reality happening, and he was positive he'd be the last man to sit here. Gunfire directly outside the fences, and the agents in the room hadn't blinked. It wasn't a tasteless joke. The world was really ending. I'm declaring martial law nationwide, effective immediately. The curfew is an hour before sunset. Looters will be dealt with harshly. Our southern border has been closed. All air traffic has been grounded, and prices are frozen across the board. He hesitated again, and then drew in a deep breath. I've also reinstated the draft. Effective 3 hours ago, all males ages 16 to 45 will surrender to the convoys trucks on their way from bases across the country. People who refuse, flee, or follow the trucks with harmful intentions will be considered treasonous and dealt with accordingly. Stay in your homes. Do not do what the soldiers tell you to, and pray for your country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. He was jerked out of the seat and an emotion from Ben, and the president stopped struggling as the agents rushed him outside, where panic was roaring from the streets. Warning, incoming! The lawn speakers blared behind them, and Carter suddenly understood that it was too late. We're going to make it. Oh, we're not going to make it. The agents literally threw him into the chopper, and the president huddled with his pale wife and twin boys as Marine One quickly rose into the air. As it ascended, the blades were assaulted with rocks, shoes, briefcases, and cell phones that doomed citizens through their fury. The agents on the ground began to fire at the mob, overwhelmed at the iron gates, and rushed across the White House lawn. Blood spattered. Bodies fell. Then Marine One reached an altitude that cut off Carter's view of the ground. "Daddy, fire in the clouds!" The explosion was blinding, and Carter kissed his wife, tear-stained lips, as the shock wave caught up to them. There was no survivors. Only 2 White House security tapes survived the blast. Thanks to the quick instincts of a well-connected reporter with a shark's reputation, and they were what most of them stunned viewers were switched to the president's voice disappeared so abruptly. The first was a 10-second clip. In that short time, one perpetrator of the apocalypse was revealed. Former President Robert Milton slid the desk into the main computer with a sneer of contempt which few have recognized from his time in office. One exalted, he was now reduced to a message boy for the current administration, and he had volunteered for this part of covering the centuries-old lie. Clearly trying to hurry, the traitor looked over the shoulder repeatedly while typing his codes. He placed his hand on the scanner, and the lights in the room flashed to deep red. Stepping over a body, the broken man took a marker from the desk and wrote on the wall before the screen faded to black. The second tape was shorter, only 4 seconds. It was a brief flash of the same traitor. Now, putting the shiny barrel of a gun into his mouth, hands already stained with blood, there was a violent flash and the former president slumped to the floor. His message on the wall glared at the crimson streaked camera lenses. I did it for my country, because my country would not do it for herself. These two clips only circulated for a few minutes before the stations airing them went to static, but it was enough. Most people understood the truth. There hadn't been a terrorist attack. The government had caused it. America and the world had been betrayed. As to why that didn't become clear for a long time after the war, and even then only a select few ever discovered the secrets of the Freemasons. There were imminent atrocities to be survived. But first, more Brady, Virginia. In northern Florida, a 20 megaton ICBM caused the swampy shelf to begin crackling like window glass. The blinding flash was felt as far away as Virginia, where fleeing citizens were struck in crammed lanes of traffic to Interstate 81 with no way to avoid the danger. Nor could they escape the long convoy of draft trucks that were battering their way through the wrecks and vehicles in the grassy median, following the orders with no exceptions. All males will surrender to the draft. If you resist or run, you will be shot. The faint bullhorn woke those who had been dozing in the uncomfortable seats of the cold Greyhound bus, and the ripple warning went through the armed man sitting against the frosty windows. People were standing, muttering among themselves, but the grunt only observed, waiting to determine how he should react. Hey, hit the old guy. They can't do that. They shot a woman. Murder. Call 911. Sergeant Mark Brady used his military voice to be heard over the dim shouting everybody made. Make rooms. The others who stuffed into the crowded bus shifted towards the door in the order but they were panicked, shoveling and yelling. Mark hefted himself up onto the vinyl seat and drove out the open window as more gunshots were screams exploded from the traffic behind the bus. People were pouring from their vehicles now, running for the nearby homes and businesses of Wireville as the MRAPs full of soldiers followed, firing M16s at the citizens who refused to surrender. Backdropped by thick black smoke and an angry red sky, these soldiers remorselessly shot fleeing males and anyone else who got in too close to their intentional targets. Only a few of the soldiers bothered with the bullhorns on their aim. These were government men specifically selected for draft recovery, and they didn't listen to begging or excuses. Recognizing the bloodlust, Mark rolled through the slush, moving out of the bus, and he stayed there as the chaos got closer. Arms and ankles locked tight around the Greyhound's icy frame. The war had canceled his leave, but he had to get home, and he was going, a decision these draft enforcers would not shoot him for. Gun in hand, Mark stayed still as all the trucks rolled through the citizens, and as he was sworn to protect, were gunned down. A second later, the air shifted, thickened, and he instinctively shut his eyes and buried his head against his arm as the sky lit up and the sun fell on him. Well, that's it for today. Our next chapter will be chapter 4. Chapter 4 is Samantha Moore, and it'll be out of the state of Wyoming. Hope you enjoyed today's story, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday with chapter 4, Samantha Moore in Wyoming. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next Tuesday.